of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay, so thank you everyone for coming. My name is Morty Bernstein. I'm council president, and sitting to my left is our engineer from T&M. I'm going to let him introduce himself for a second.
How you doing? Charlie Cunliffe with T&M Associates, Township Engineer.
Charlie has come to many of our council meetings, and a lot of the questions and ideas that come up tonight, obviously, we're going to discuss with him. Sitting to his left is Mayor Kuhn. Sitting to her left is Mr. Terafenko, Charlie Terafenko, our business administrator. And to the left of Mr. Terafenko is Councilman Nino Borelli.
Good evening, everybody. Thanks for being here.
And just to put it out there for anyone who's new to this, so being that this is not a council meeting, and we don't have our attorneys here. We only, for the Sunshine Law, we're only allowed to have 2 council members at a time. So all council members were invited. I know Councilman Palmieri is unable to make it tonight. Councilman Bresci is going to be coming around 7:45 and switching with Mr. Borelli. And then I did not hear back from Mr. Pollack, but if he shows up, I will leave at 7:45. If not, I'll stay until 8:30. So this roundtable subject is going to be infrastructure, which is a very broad word. I was discussing with some residents before. It really could be never ending. So I'm going to try to start off with a couple of areas of infrastructure, and I'm going to bring up a couple of subjects, and then I'm going to let our engineer talk about them a little bit more in detail, and then we're going to open the floor for questions, comments, ideas, and areas of concern that we could, have administration and the engineer look into over the next period of time. So I think based on our conversation, Charlie, that we had this morning, I want to start off with, we are continuously and constantly getting a lot of emails about infrastructure, traffic infrastructure. One of the areas, Charlie, I'm going to want you to address, if you don't mind, is flooding, drainage, which are obviously a big concern. I know Charlie and I have discussed together with my colleagues on council a little bit. Nino and I discussed, I think it was this morning briefly for a second. And it's something that I think you brought up in August, Charlie, if I remember correctly. We were in the clerk's office about there are some other towns that have other ordinances. We're seeing a lot of development in the town in the existing neighborhoods where people are making additions within their setbacks, and we're losing we're adding more impervious coverage. When you add more impervious coverage, and Charlie will explain, we obviously have less area for the water and rain waters to go, which is obviously currently leading, and in the future could even lead to more flooding through our neighborhoods. So what could we do as a township to protect our neighborhoods and that's area one that I want to discuss. An additional area that I think we need to discuss is some of our infrastructure upgrades on our roadways. It's not a secret we have a lot of traffic. Even if not another unit in town would ever be built, we have a lot of traffic. What could we do to be proactive and not be reactive when it's too late? Would be area number 2. And we've talked, and I know you put together a little proposal for one of the major roadways in town. And I want to hopefully you to present that to the public. Not that we're ready to build that roadway or do anything on the roadway, but just to get a better idea of the cost and what goes behind designing a roadway. One of the next issues that we're continuously receiving a lot of questions are about sidewalks. The township has had multiple conversations internally and with the county. A lot of our concerns that we have are actually on county roads. And we've had those conversations. The county is going to be unveiling, they told us, I think in March, they're going to be unveiling a sidewalk plan to help the municipality, something they've never done before, with sidewalks on county roads. So if we could discuss that, and I don't know if we'll get to it, but obviously lighting also is something which is constantly coming up. So Charlie, if we can start off with, I think, water, drainage, and some of the flooding concerns, and go from there.
Yes, thank you. Good evening, everyone. So currently for Jackson Township, we are subject to the state stormwater rules. I apologize again, some feedback. NJAC 7.8. That basically governs major developments. So anytime a property owner, typically subdivisions or site plans, is disturbing more than 1 acre of land where they're creating 1/4 acre of new impervious coverage. It triggers compliance with the state stormwater management rules. Each township in the state of New Jersey has to pass their own stormwater control ordinance, which basically models the state statute and could modify it to be a little bit more restrictive. What we're seeing in Jackson Township particularly, along the east part of town, we had developments that were built in the 60s and 70s, our Brookwoods, that predate any conventional stormwater management requirements at the state level. So there's no stormwater management basins for detention, for water quality. Everything just essentially drains to a water course. There was a thought back in the day that that was the best thing. Let's get the water to the streams and everyone else will be high and dry. But when you have one property that's doing that, it's not necessarily impactful. But when you have a large watershed with hundreds of properties that are doing that, it's a compounding effect. And, the state, I think in 2004, adopted the current stormwater management rules to try to catch up on some of that. They updated them again in 2021 to add some more standards with green infrastructure. The gray area is that development that's less than that threshold. So we're seeing a lot of homes being built that are significantly larger, that have basketball courts, that have swimming pools on our east part of town where there isn't, it's under the threshold of where stormwater management is currently required. One of the things that I discussed with the mayor and the council is going back about 4 years ago, there's a public advocacy group, the Watershed Institute, actually recommended going a step further and trying to capture that development that doesn't meet a major development. So they call it minor development or non-major development. So the goal would be to set realistic requirements for residential and non-residential development, to put in dry wells, to put in cisterns, to put in pervious paving, different measures of stormwater management infrastructure to try to capture that low-hanging fruit. Because right now, a lot of that is going to our aging infrastructure that's corrugated metal pipe that's rusting out. If it is concrete pipe, it's old concrete pipe that doesn't have gaskets, so the joints are failing. It all has a cumulative effect on the township. It's all going to our water courses without any means to, one, capture and attenuate that runoff. And then a bigger part of that, which has a compounding effect, is there's no way to, I won't say there's no way, but trash, in 2002, 2004, when the state updated the rules, they made it a requirement. All the inlets have to have the eco heads to stop trash going into it, right? But that stuff is still getting into our system. Current stormwater management basins collect that runoff and have measures where it's, a 4-bay. So you can see all this accumulation of material. It makes it a little bit easier for DPW to see that, to clean it out, so it's not getting into our water courses. In the Brookwoods, we have, just take a step back, the township authorized us as part of the township's MS4 stormwater permit to do township-wide stormwater infrastructure mapping. A lot of residents, you might have either gotten a letter individually or you might have saw it posted on the township website. And that's basically to create an inventory of all inlets, piping, outfalls, so we can kind of monitor how the system's functioning, find out where there is trouble issues, where the water's coming from, and try to pinpoint the issues to try to correct it. What we're finding is a lot of these outfalls, say in like the Brookwoods that discharge into the Metedeconk or tributaries of Metedeconk, there's outfalls that are buried under 2 feet of water that are inaccessible, requires actual excavation equipment to try to find the outfall pipe. There's pipe, CMP, that has failed and collapsed, where accumulation of silt and debris are now basically restricting flow. So it's not just a matter of adopting a minor development standard to try to capture some of that smaller runoff coming from some of these smaller sites. There's also significant infrastructure improvements that have to come with that, because this aging infrastructure that's 60 plus, 70 plus years old, when you add in all this extra runoff from the development that's been going on, it just has a compounding effect.
So just to interrupt for a second. So is it fair to say that we have obviously an issue that our infrastructure is 60 or 70 years old, plus even in these existing developments, where people are modifying their homes or modifying their properties, that's going to make the issue so much more worse.
So right now, the township code, when we're reviewing a plot plan for an individual home, there's general language about not creating a negative drainage impact to a neighboring property. It's very open-ended on what exactly is a negative impact and how much, is a negative impact. So the goal would be to adopt some standards that are more prescriptive on what's required in terms of dry well or stormwater management measures. So that way it's less of a guessing game and it's more uniform to all those developments.
So can you just address the ordinance that we are currently under consideration?
Yes, so it would basically set different thresholds for residential non-major development and then non-residential non-major development. So for someone with a single family home, if you were constructing addition on your home, 1,000 square feet or greater, 1,000 square feet of new impervious coverage on that property, you would be required to, if the ordinance were to be adopted, 1.5 cubic feet of storage for every 10 square feet of new impervious coverage. That roughly equates to what the state calls their New Jersey water quality storm, which is typical sizing for like a dry well. For non-residential development with that same 1,000 square foot threshold, they would be required to provide 2.5 cubic feet of storage for every 10 square feet of new impervious coverage. And there's a lot of language in here where it's left also to the discretion of the board engineer or to the township engineer. If in the engineering judgment of the township or board engineer, they were to find that even with what's being proposed, there could be a negative impact to an adjoining property, they could require 4 cubic feet of storage for 10 square feet. So we realize that not every property in town has the same features. They don't have the same slope. They don't have the same characteristic with the neighborhood and everything like that. So it's more prescriptive, but it also still gives some engineering judgment to be able to make a common sense recommendation in those regards.
So Carlos, before you ask one more question on this part of the subject, so possibly an ordinance to help the future of the existing neighborhoods with people taking more impervious coverage. What about the existing? I know you guys mapped out the town. What about the existing infrastructure and stormwater?
Yes.
Yeah.
So we're significantly behind, especially in the Brookwoods. There's and it's challenging, and part of the reason for the MS4 mapping at the state level, the requirement is we have many county roads that have drainage systems, which then connect into drainage systems and township roads. And the ownership of those systems, especially as you go further back in time and who's responsible for maintaining it, there's a little bit gray area of who's responsible and that kind of thing. So that's part of the reason for the infrastructure mapping. The other part is when we have an incidents like last July, where we've got, I want to say 3 or 4 rain events in about a 30 to 45 day time period, where we got anywhere from 2 to 4 inches in an hour. For one of those rains to happen in a single year is astronomically high. For those to happen in like a 30 or 45 day time period is even astronomically higher. So when those occurrences do happen and we do have a flooding issue, having the mapping handy and readily available makes it a little bit easier for the township to be able to troubleshoot these problems, because without that mapping, we'd have to go get surveys, which is cost, takes time. So the goal is with that is to help try to troubleshoot these issues and be a little bit more proactive to address them in a more timely manner, because every year we're already probably 60 years behind the gun here. Every additional year just has that.
What's the
compounding effect.
price range that we're talking about when it comes to these type of projects?
Yes. So we can probably pave anywhere from 10 to 15 roads with like $1 million to $1.5 million, just simple mill and overlaying a road. If we have to replace, 1,000 feet of drainage pipe, depending on the depth, we could chew through anywhere from 500 to $1 million of that just with replacing the drainage pipe. There's West Connecticut Concourse. DPW's had to have their emergency contractor out there within the last 3 years, probably at least 5 times. And it's replacing 200 feet here, and then replacing 200 feet here, and then replacing 200 feet here. So the mapping should hopefully help the township be able to come look more proactively to develop a 5-year plan to address some of these items. And Christian, can you pull open the first 2 attachments? So this is Township Roadway paving projects from 2018 to 2025, and there's a legend at the bottom. It's just color coded by year. So the township has spent, I want to say, money spent and projects completed since 2018, about $14.5 million on roadway and drainage projects. Probably would say 80% of that, if not 85% of that, is more so towards the roadway paving component of it.
What people see.
Correct, yeah. The roads that you drive on every day. We have been spending anywhere from $500,000 to $800,000 each year on drainage. But I think that's percentage. Say we spend $2.5 million each year on roadway and infrastructure improvements. We need to start looking at more of that percentage being allocated towards drainage improvements, maybe dial back a little bit on the paving. And then, I know Council President's also going to talk about sidewalks. We have a couple sidewalk projects that are in the works. Those are also a big component in need as well.
So, and then I'm going to turn the floor over for a couple questions on the subject for a second. So the town has put approximately $14 million in. I would say 75, 80% of it, you would probably guess, is the paving, what everyone sees and looks shiny and nice, hopefully. How have those determinations historically been made? Like, obviously we got calls, we got complaints. How do you guys, it's a big town, and how do you guys decide which roads we're paving this year, and again, looking at, like you said, the drainage, which is underground, we obviously did the mapping. Is there data that shows which systems are in the most dire state so we can make a more educated decision, or just?
So
Yeah.
part of the issue with the drainage pipes is there's an issue when there's a sinkhole, when the road starts to cave in. So that's right at the parent. But that issue between that sinkhole starting and it actually coming to the surface could be 5, could be 10 years. One of the things that we're trying to incorporate on some of our future capital projects, especially the drainage projects, is having the contractor have a subcontractor televise drainage lines, because that is the only way that you can truly know what the condition of a pipe is in. The mapping just tells you where the pipes are, tells you the inverts, tells you the grade elevations, everything like that. If we were to do comprehensive televising of all these lines, these drainage lines, to assess the condition of it, it would be a significant undertaking. So the mapping with past experience helps us start to identify where our known trouble issues are, and then we can start to develop plans to implement improvements to those aging infrastructures, those aging assets.
So I'm assuming if you were making a recommendation to the budget process, you would definitely recommend that there should be more money allocated to drainage this year than paving.
Yeah, so
We had this conversation because we've had it for the last 2 years, because I believe I've said it, and Councilman said, we're so behind in our infrastructure. It's kind of scary, but I believe the last 5 years prior to, this year and the year prior to this one was more paving roads, paving over paving. And we really weren't looking at the infrastructure.
Right. So Mayor, I want to turn the floor over. I guess my question is how was it determined until now? Because I remember last year seeing a roadway, I think it was in Harmony Farms, that was paved twice in the past 4 years. And again, I'm sure there was a reason for that, but like, how did we make that determination? Because there have been roads that people have made requests. And like, I think residents definitely want to know, it's not just 3 people sitting in the back room making the decision, eeny, meeny, miny, mo, and how you guys make that from a professional standpoint.
Yeah, so the township had commissioned a basically pavement rating program around the time of COVID, might have been a year or 2 prior to that. We subconsulted with a outside vendor, Advanced Infrastructure Design. They utilize the same equipment that the DOT utilizes to basically, they drive a vehicle that has cameras that captures all the imperfection of the roadway, cracks, depressions, failures, and they take all that information and they boil it into a number and score on a order of 0 to 5. And then based off of that ranking of the condition of the road, they created basically ranking from worst to best of the roads and townships. So that way to help the township prioritize, where we're spending our money. So it's spending where it's needed.
Do you mind me interrupting? Is that something which we could, I've never seen that.
Yeah.
I would love to share that with the public so
That's
people,
certainly something that can be made available. What I will say is it's a tool, right? So, and when you're rating something on a score from 0 to 5, you could have 100 roads that have a score of 3.1, right? Now, what is the difference between all those roads that are 3.1? So that's where the engineering judgment and the boots on the ground come into that. So each year during the budget season in the fall, when we're making recommendations for potential roads to be considered in the following year's capital budget, we sit down with our head of DPW, Sean Belinsky. We look at that list, but then we also say, all right, where do we have drainage issues? Where is the number lacking in telling us the story? You guys are out there plowing the road. You guys are out there doing leaf collection. What are you seeing boots on the ground? And we try to marry the two and utilize the tool, but also the firsthand input to come with some type of recommendation. What I can tell you is in the last 8 years or so, the capital paving projects have been on the order to $1.5 million. We would like to pave every single road in town, and I think the town would like to pave every single road in town in a given year. It's just not financially and fiscally possible. So when we come with a recommendation, it might be 20 roads. And then by the time we actually go and get authorized to design, some of them may require survey. There might be drainage issues that we have to correct.
So I want to open it. So I want to bring up two things, which I think you alluded to it, but I want to bring it up for a second. I actually see we have a member of our MUA here, so I appreciate him coming because I know can go back and ensure that all the communication is going both ways. But obviously, ensuring that there's proper communication with our MUA. We had a project that's obviously going on Bethel Church, which was a DOT grant. And I think part of the infrastructure design included knowledge of what the MUA's long-term plans with some of the water lines on that roadway were. So I think that's another whole, if we talk about infrastructure, the MUA is a huge part of this necessary, I think, conversation. And I would probably say if we're going to end up having another roundtable like this, we should formally invite the MUA, making sure that their professionals are here, because I think it's a necessary component of this conversation. The other thing I just wanted to address for a second, and you mentioned when they opened up some of the roadways, I think we also had a conversation, I'm not sure if it was today or last week, about another potential ordinance when people open up roadways. And I think you told me, I think NJ Gas and some of the utility companies are in the process of possibly starting a major project that would really go through a large portion of our town and open up a lot of our roadways. And a possible ordinance, I think you mentioned Howell.
Yeah,
Yeah.
so the township has a street opening ordinance. So anyone, private entity, public utility that wants to open up the townships right away to replace or install new infrastructure has to get a street opening permit from the township. The original enactment of the township street opening ordinance was in 1971 or 73, thereabouts. There's been a few iterations to the substance of the ordinance. The last one might have been 1991. So a lot of, the fees, the bonding requirements, the methods and means to actually repair a road are not commensurate with what today's standards of construction are. So we're looking at making recommendations to council for consideration on overhauling the street opening ordinance. I do a lot of work in Howell Township as a zoning board and special projects engineer. 10 years ago or so, they knew that utility owners were coming through with some significant infrastructure improvements, transmission mains, running the length of town, miles and miles of improvement. They updated the road opening permit ordinance to require private developers, utility companies to actually mill and repave from curb to curb when they're opening a certain length of the roadway. The reality of it is right now is the language in the ordinance is outdated and it's very gray in regards to what the appropriate means of restoring the roadway is after a roadway opening. I'm sure everyone has driven through some part of town where you might see a 6-inch gas trench running a couple hundred feet, right? So the goal would be to have more prescriptive requirements for whether it's a private developer, whether it's a utility company, to have to repair the road to a standard that we're not going to be coming back in the township 5 years later and having to redo those.
So
those
both
big
of these
repairs.
ordinances that we're discussing are things that would throw the expense on the developer and avoid the taxpayers being responsible to clean up someone else's, I'm gonna call it mess in a positive way, but making sure that the developer or the homeowner is actually paying for his fair share.
So yes, that is a good point. And I just want to say, with any ordinance, right, we want to be cognizant of our residents, right? We want to set thresholds at an appropriate level where it's not creating an undue burden or undue hardship on an individual property owner who wants to replace the sidewalk in front of their property, or the curbing in front of their property is failing and they want to replace that. Creating the threshold and some exceptions where we're getting those big infrastructure projects and getting the roadway repaid, but not necessarily creating an undue hardship on every individual property owner, because there's going to be good that comes from it, but any ordinance or anything that you effectuate, there is going to be some peripheral unintended consequences. So it's trying to make sure we strike an appropriate balance where we're capturing the big things, but not creating an undue hardship for the small things.
Okay, so now I'm gonna give, and anyone has any questions, I can see Carlos with the mic, and then after we'll pass the mic around if anyone else.
Okay. Okay, I don't want to be mean, but you just threw a lot of stuff at us, right? Maybe for the future, can we go topic by topic and I tried to write everything down, but you went through a lot of stuff and you went through it fast and you used words that I didn't understand what the hell you were talking about. So if you really want participation, please, topic by topic.
So I think.
And allow the questions for each of the topics, not
Sure.
like
So
bombard
Carlos,
us with all this
So Carlos, I
information.
think we're probably.
I got really frustrated. I'm sorry.
Yeah, it's
but-
fine. And Carlos, let me just address you for a second. I think we're probably, I started off saying these are the topics we're looking, and like I discussed
Yeah,
with
but you
Jim
guys
before.
went into it. You
What?
started asking all these questions and you went detailed.
We're sticking to the,
All
right
at
now,
once.
right now, so far, we're talking about drainage, and that's really, and water.
Okay,
Yeah.
all right. I'm gonna get to my questions. Okay, I'm gonna get to my questions. So I think you mentioned something about an ordinance, right? That was coming up to pass. And you said that for every 1,000 square footage, there's gonna be storage. What do you mean by storage?
Yes, so stormwater storage.
I mean,
So-
storage is, a barn.
No, so underground storage of stormwater management, so a dry well, right? So your roof
Okay.
leaders that come down from the
Yep.
house, instead of them being directed right at grade and running into the township's road in the conveyance system,
Yep,
it would have to go into a dry well, so.
I gotcha.
Pipe or,
all right, I got you. So that ordinance says that if I'm a resident and I want to put up a barn or something like that, you're now going to make me also put up some kind of dry well, something, right? That's what this ordinance is going to do.
That's
Me
what-
as a resident, I'm going to have to put something up to
If-
capture that
If
extra
you're
water.
taking more impervious coverage, which is going to lead to flooding in our neighborhoods,
Yes.
then yes, that would be what this ordinance would do if it
On
would go
me,
for it.
right?
Yeah.
Okay, I just want to make that clear because, okay. This infrastructure mapping that we said we're going to do, is that this year? How long does that take and how much does it cost?
yeah, so the council authorized that in the summer of 2025. The total effort was on the order of $450,000. And I just want to preface this, so this is township-wide collection of all stormwater management assets. So that's inlets, that's drainage pipes, that's outfall pipes. And it's a requirement of the township's MS4, so it's municipal separate storm sewer systems.
I don't need to know that.
Don't worry, I'm on
So basically.
Again, you're trying to confuse me?
No.
Okay, come on.
I'm
Just get to the point. So when is that going to be done? The mapping?
So I would say 90% of the collection was completed in the fall. There's
Okay.
probably on the order of 50 to 75 outfalls and inlets, which were inaccessible because the outfall is at a stream bed covered with years of vegetation. Yeah. The
So
spring of
when
20
do you expect it to be done?
Spring of 2026.
Thank you.
Yeah,
That's it.
I'm just trying to give you.
I know, it's a little too much. It's overwhelming. I'm sorry.
I understand.
I'm not
Listen,
I'm not that smart.
I-
Okay.
I
Um,
get get very
Yeah.
enthused by stormwater management. It's something that I take very seriously and dear to heart. So if I'm talking, it's not because I'm trying to talk above anyone. It's because it's something that I think is very important, and it's something that I think could have a positive impact for Jackson Township.
Okay. Mr. Bernstein, you mentioned $14 million spent or budgeted for or something?
No. So I
What's
think
the 14 million?
$14 million, I think Charlie said, was the money that was spent in the past 5 years, he said?
Yeah. So Christian, can you pull up the second?
Okay.
Here, Carlos, we're gonna put it up on the screen. There it go. There it is.
So this is just an inventory of all the capital projects relating to roadway repaving, drainage, pedestrian safety, ADA accessibility, since 2018. So
6 years, 7 years.
Okay. So I guess in the budget for this year, how much are we spending on, not the paving, but, well, we just spoke about the problems that we have. The stormwater.
So you talk about the budget from 2025 or 2026?
This year,
So
we're in
we did-
2020, what year are we in?
We're
in
in 2026, but we're
So-
still, yeah.
With the budget last year,
2026.
everybody knows that the budget took longer. I met
Yes.
with all the department heads, including Charlie here, in regards to switching it from doing road improvements to doing infrastructure improvements.
Right.
So that is something that the council president and myself did start last year, and we are doing it this year because that's where the conversation
That's
came
good.
in.
Right. So Mayor, just to stop for a second. So Charlie, do you have a number from 2025? Because some of those projects are still ongoing for Carlos, of what money was spent on road paving and what was spent on the
Yeah,
Yeah.
it doesn't have to.
yeah, so
And I guess the point is that I think the mayor just made the point that we moved the emphasis from paving. I personally, yeah, paving is great, but the infrastructure I think is more critical. And you've moved that emphasis. That's great.
yeah,
And
so
that's real.
I apologize. I didn't mean to catch you up, but the 2025 budget and then it's followed by capital bond ordinances. Those are based off of recommendations from like October of 2024. So some of the recommendations as far as how much money to be allocated for repaving versus drainage for sidewalks, those are, at this point, a year and a half stale. So that's why this discussion is happening, because, the money that was been allocated in the ordinances might be
Okay.
going to different things.
All right, and I think I probably overstayed my welcome here, but one last thing is, so in our new budget, how much, do we have grants coming, and how much are we going to be spending on infrastructure, the stormwater and everything that we got a problem with,
So
and can we get grants?
So with regard to grants, and the mayor has a monthly grant call with our grant writer Millennium, and they've been authorized to apply for various grants. Some of them include infrastructure, NJDOT. Sorry, the DOT grant was something that we applied recently. We're in the process of applying for a grant in the high school area, because there are certain grants that make it easier when there's a school in the area, for the Cooks Bridge, that whole side of town. And I think the short answer is we are absolutely applying for whatever grants we could. And if anyone sees a grant, we have residents sometimes who will send us a grant. We'll forward it to Charlie. We'll forward it to the business administrator, and they'll send it up the totem pole. With regard to how much money in 2026, I have yet to see the budget. I think we know that you and others are part of that, hopefully part of that process. But I think hopefully over the next month, we'll be following up with the mayor on that one. Yeah. Jim.
And just to follow up to that regarding the grants. So one of the challenging things with the grants, especially when bigger ticket grants that come from the state or come from the federal government, a lot of times there's more strings attached with those grants as far as reporting what you can and you cannot do, what's eligible, what's not eligible. So while there is grant money available, sometimes it has to be tailored towards the right project and the right improvement, because the timeline between getting the grant, doing a design, putting something out to bid to actually get to construction, the grant aspect of that can delay things, another year because of those enhanced requirements. And it's all for making sure the money's being used appropriately and everything like that. It's just, unfortunately, there's more oversight at the state and the federal level that kind of pushes that timeline out a little bit.
Anyone else? Jim.
So you talked a lot about some of the questions I had, and it all comes back to one thing for me. What are you telling the residents? This stuff is not published anywhere for the residents to see, so we're all playing a guessing game. So I think it would be smart that once all of these reports are completed, everything gets posted to the website. It's only fair that we as residents be able to see what you're doing or what you're planning on doing so that we can have our input as to, instead of taking the top 5, maybe number 7 is more important to the residents than you really think, so you want to move that up.
Charlie?
So
I'll let Jim.
just kind of, where I was looking is, again, I would love to see a schedule for all road repairs, how they're listed. I would love to know in a 5-year time horizon, what the plan is under a capital budget. So what are you planning to do in 5 years? I understand things change, but at least if you give us a plan for 5 years that show us what you're looking to do, we can say, yeah, we're okay with it, or you know what, these are the things we like, these are the things we don't like, and maybe you reconsider some of the things. The other thing you talk about, I know you're talking about the drains and basins and everything. My question to you guys is, because one of the things I see in town, especially in the fall, is the drains are not cleared. So is there a schedule that you can provide that shows what basins and drains have been reviewed by our DPW and anybody else that you want to have sending out there and looking at it? Just so that we know that they're being inspected. Because I can tell you, there's 3 drains right in front of my house. I'm on a T, so I get one on each street. And I can tell you, after leaf pickup, every one of them is clogged because leaf pickup does not get everything. And it stays that way unless a resident comes out and cleans it. I actually had a neighbor that was doing that for the longest time. He's moved, so we lost that. My other neighbor that probably would do it, he's in the process of leaving, so I don't know where we're going to get that. So I think these are the things that, from the topics you guys talked about, I think you need to do a better job of giving us the information so that we can be more prepared for any conversation. Because this is tough. You can spout out a lot of things, and we've had conversations, and I told you my water issue that I have in my home, and yes, it goes back 50 years, so I don't know how we fix it. But if we don't know what's going on, it's really hard for us to get involved and give you our views of things. So I'd like to see more of that.
Jim, I think we had information published on our website regarding roads and which ones were being paved each year, but I don't think it was accessible enough maybe for the residents, or maybe buried deep into the website somewhere so maybe we can publish that on the front page, or consider publishing that information front and center on the website, as well as on our social media page. And also, I know the council in the past, and maybe we can do more of it, is to comment on existing road and infrastructure projects going on in our town, so we can keep the residents aware of what's going on, what the cost associated with it is, and the details, and other information about anticipated project finish times, as well as where and when and how. So people are aware of where their taxpayer money is going to, and when projects are going to be completed, particularly if it's a road or near where they live, or in the area that they frequent a lot, driving and all. So, but I think we can do more on that front. Sure.
Yeah. So I can tell you the last document I saw on the website that talked about road paving was a press release from 2022, I believe it was, and it was more for county roads.
It was October of 20, right before an election.
And they all had completion dates of 2023. I can tell you some of them still haven't been done. So, what's written is not worth a whole hell of beans if it's not going to get done.
But Jim, I think to answer you for a second, I think the first step is making sure that these studies and the information that helps the professionals make those decisions is accessible to the public.
So that was going to kind of be my next two quick comments, is because one of the things that I'd like to see, and yes, I am on the zoning board, so I have to be careful how I ask certain questions, but I'd like to see some of these engineer and professional reports be published before you guys are taking votes on them so that we can see truly what you're voting on instead of just getting seeing a resolution for something. Unless we dig into it ourselves, we have no clue what that resolution is for. So I'd like to see that. The other thing I want to know is there any accountability measures that are in place that ensure the infrastructure projects stay on time and on budget? And does that get published anywhere?
So it's very, before I turn the floor to Charlie on this one, I just want to say one thing is I actually called Charlie right before the last council meeting. I was going through some of the resolutions and we were getting money back from a project. And I said, since when as the township do we get money back from a project? And I think your response was it actually came in lower than initially was budgeted. But Charlie, could you explain like how it works with timeframes and?
Yeah, so in the last couple of years, the budget, it all hinges on when the budget gets adopted. Once the budget gets adopted, then a capital bond ordinance can get introduced. Once that gets introduced, there's like an estoppel period before you can actually have a bond to do the improvements. And then depending on the project, if it's simple capital milling paving, a lot of that stuff is done looking at GIS aerials. It's very much simplified as far as what the design plans look like, and it's easier to expedite those projects. Anything that requires a survey of the roadway is going to add 3 to 6 months onto the project, depending on the time of year, just from getting the survey and having all the relevant information. I would say from the time that a capital bond ordinance is introduced to the time that a job is closed out and final payments made to the contractor, it's generally on the order of like 1 to 2 years, depending on the complexity of the project. There may be certain years where monies from the last bond ordinance weren't fully expended because last year's job came under budget and now we have more money. So then we're adding 3 or 4 more roads onto the 2024 road program to get the most bang for our buck. It's all economies of scale. The more you can put out there, the more it is for a contractor to give a competitive price on doing work. Understood.
100%. So before, I know Mr. Borelli is leaving in a minute. Anything you wanted to just say publicly
Just
before?
one other, I had a question regarding the stormwater requirements and the ordinance that we're looking at. Will that apply to existing applications that have already been approved for building and development? Because there's been numerous, or is that at the time of, or for future applications? Or is it something we can apply to existing applications so they do follow those stormwater rules and regs where the responsibility will be on them and not on the taxpayers? Just thinking about everybody here in this room and the rest of the residents in our town regarding, trying to ease their tax burden and also the burden on our township's municipal budget.
Yeah, so, and I apologize if I get too nerdy about it, but anyone that sits on the planning and zoning board, right, your board professional, your engineer is responsible for reviewing their stormwater management design to comply with the township standards. When they're reviewing that stormwater management design, they should be looking at that property to the maximum build out potential. So if it's a 30-lot subdivision and the ordinance allows you to put 70% impervious coverage on a lot, I'm just throwing a hypothetical number. I don't know that that's actually per zone, but they should be making sure that the stormwater design for that development captures the maximum development potential of that property. So this ordinance isn't meant to create an enhanced threshold for someone that went to the planning and zoning board, did an engineered stormwater design for the maximum development potential for that piece of property. It's meant for a lot of our older developments that don't have stormwater management basins because there's more catching up to do.
So if I could I just want to clarify this. Tell me if I'm understanding, and I think to address Nino's question here. This ordinance that is being considered that we discussed briefly this morning is developments, a subdivision. The developer comes with a 50, 60, 30 home subdivision. That is the planning board and zoning board's job to make sure that they're setting up the infrastructure. This would go to the existing developments where there's no new thresholds that are being required. And if someone already got his approvals, we wouldn't be able to put an extra requirement to go put this in. But if someone coming now to build a basketball court or build a swimming pool or build an addition, that's where we would be dealing with.
So I'll just throw a subdivision then off the top of it, like Valley Ridge Estates off of Valley Road. Someone in that development, if they came in for an individual plot plan and their plot plan showed they were violating the impervious coverage that's allowed in the zone, they wouldn't be covered under that exemption. They would have to then comply with the ordinance requirements because it wasn't accounted for in the design of that subdivision or that development. So it's not, hey, you got an approval for the planning and the zoning board, you've got carte blanche. If you're exacerbating impervious coverages, setback requirements, or your property, you're just putting in a basketball court that sheet flows onto the guy behind you that's below you. You can't just do that. So it's to developments that were approved by the planning and zoning board. Doesn't create that increased burden unless they're violating a township standard or they're
Coming for a change.
Or they're blatantly doing something that would cause an issue for a neighboring property. Well, yeah. So when the ordinance, if it does get introduced by council, every member of the public, there's a first and second public reading. There's also a consistency review that has to happen with the planning and the zoning board. So there will be multiple shots at public engagement and interaction with that. And I would just say on my behalf, I've never been accused of being less detailed. So,
Carlos.
You just want, because I think that leads to your question. So if I had something done 2 years ago, am I grandfathered in? I don't have to follow this ordinance.
If this passes,
Yes or no?
Yes, you're
Okay, I'm
grandfathered in.
grandfathered in.
Yes,
right?
but
Correct.
Carlos, if you then go back in front of the board, or even not in front of the board, let's say you have a 5-acre property and you want to put a 1,000-square-foot addition in it, doesn't require a variance from the boards or anything from the boards, and you want to put 1,000-square-foot. If this ordinance would go through, you would then have to go ahead and put this system in. Correct. Mr. Stapper-Smith, you want to take a mic? You want to pass him the mic?
Would they now have to adhere to the new standard?
that is a very
That's a
complicated question, but it's a good question. So there are certain protections under the MLUL as far as preliminary and final subdivisions, extensions and things like that. There's also permit extension acts. So ultimately, the township attorney would probably have to weigh in. The way the ordinance is written is any development after, I want to say March of 2004, that was approved by a valid site plan or subdivision by the planning and zoning board that complies with all the zoning requirements would not have to comply with the ordinance requirement. It's meant to capture a lot of those older developments where the infrastructure doesn't exist to the standard of what's been built in the last 20 years.
To your point, you mentioned something before. There's a program called Vitalistics that townships use, that they put on their township vehicles that actually do the surveying of roads and road conditions. And the information is kept on a local basis and able to be reviewed on a daily basis if you wanted it. They put it on their garbage trucks, their DPW trucks, whatever. And as they transverse the town, they're doing an immediate assessment, and it's simply done with an iPhone.
Do you know of any adjacent municipalities that have implemented that technology?
Lakewood has it in every garbage truck.
Lakewood and every garbage truck. Thank you.
It could have used in all the plows this winter.
It's in the plows too.
Okay. Anyone else?
Okay,
Ms. Hannah.
so stormwater management is your passion. And so here's my question. You were talking about the Brookwoods, Brookwood 1, 2, 3, and 4. And they exhaust into the Metedeconk, which is a C1 waterway. And over time, what I'm seeing in those neighborhoods is well more than double the amount of cars being parked all over. So how, with that, and this increased stormwater situation, What is Jackson Township doing with the non-point source pollution that is going into a C1 waterway? How is that being monitored?
So I can't speak specifically to, additional cars on the roads creating more non-point solution. As far as like stormwater runoff, they should be parking on the township's roadway, or they should be parking on a driveway that was approved with some planning or zoning approval, or at least a plot plan approval. So this new ordinance, the goal would be to at least address the stormwater quantity, so the volume of stormwater, so that if someone wants to go put in, a 1,500 square foot driveway and park 10 vehicles on their driveway, there's a means to capture that and attenuate that runoff, so it's not going to the Metedeconk. The water quality issue is very difficult in the sense a dry well will provide some water quality benefit. That's the reason why it's sized for the state water quality storm. The challenge is a lot of the Brookwoods, they just daylight to the Metedeconk or a tributary of the Metedeconk. There's no stormwater basin with a forebay to collect all the sediment, nutrients, plastic bottles. So as we're looking at projects, we're trying to implement measures, whether it's manufactured treatment devices, whether it's oversized drainage structures with a sump to help collect some of that nutrient load and trash and debris before it gets to the water course. The problem is we're playing catch up with 70 years of.
Well, exactly, because you're doing this infrastructure. You know it's a major problem. The Metedeconk feeds how many municipalities downstream? So we're polluting it, and we're polluting the neighboring towns, which has been a problem as more and more building and approvals are going on in this town that are butting up to our C1 waterways, which is our water supply. Because with this whole infrastructure and the MUA, more than half of Jackson Township is on a well. I'm included. So unless you have lived in a home with a well and a septic, you have no idea. You're shaking your head. You have no idea. You don't know. So with this improved infrastructure, I'm seeing that a lot of plans are being made for a specific portion of this town. And the rest of this town is being forgotten, including the roadways. And you and I have discussed my specific road, and you talked about breaking apart, in which the whole thing is. So when I'm hearing that Harmony Farms in 4 years has been repaved twice, and we have a municipality of roadways, 100 square miles, how do you think the residents on this side of town feel? I mean, you guys are making these decisions, and I would really like to see an update on the township website that has listed every single street, because we have a right to know. I have a right to know how many roads along the one side of town are being paved, as I see the roads in Casville, Roba Farms, Holmansville, and you name it, haven't been touched in 40 to 50 years. But we can repave Harmony Farms twice in 4 years.
So the map that was shared, Kristen, if you can go back to the first.
I saw the map.
Yeah, so that inventory that was done in 2018 or 2020, that is certainly something that can be made publicly available. What I will say is that is a snapshot in time that those roads were driven in 2018 or 2019, right? So it's a tool. The reality is the traffic that is coming through town, the volume of traffic is more concentrated in the central and eastern portion of the town. So if you look at two roads, one on the western part of town, one on the eastern part of town that had the same score in 2018 or 2019, the condition of those roads 7 years later may not necessarily be the same condition based off of the amount of traffic and development that's occurring in there. So yes, you can look at this map and you can see that there is more of a concentration toward the eastern part of town. But that's where developments are higher density, smaller lot area.
I used to
There-
live there, so I do know.
No.
But basically what this municipality is asking is for half of the taxpayers on the other side of town to pay and subsidize the improvements on another side of town. Because again, there are regions in this municipality, out by Legler, Dorothy's. I can go on and on. I've been here 61 years. That are being neglected. But this town is worried about making sure other areas are happy. And that is very troubling to me.
So, and I apologize. So what I would just say is, I think what the map doesn't tell the story is, as you head further west, more of the roads that are, I'll call them out roads, are county roadways. So that's not to say that we don't have county roadways on the eastern part of town, but a lot of those roads that are longer in length are county roads. That's not under our purview to repave them. That's not to say that the developments out there that are a cul-de-sac off of those roads won't need to get repaved at some
What
time.
about Fish?
What's that?
What about West Fish?
West
Will
Fish Road?
that ever be paved?
So,
It's a dirt road.
so between
How
Diamond
many
and.
dirt roads do we still have that aren't even being paved?
Okay. Yeah, so what I can tell you is, and this has been something since my involvement in Jackson, it's not as simple as just paving an unimproved roadway. When you go and pave an unimproved roadway, it triggers stormwater management requirements.
I
You know,
totally know.
so I would like to say, let's
But the
pave.
problem is people are going back there, contractors that are renting in this town that can't get rid of their debris and they're dumping back there.
So if I just want to interrupt for a second. The question you're asking is exactly part of the reason why we're here. We're not talking about what was, we're talking about what we need to be doing as a
I know
town
that. I
going
just want to
forward.
make sure moving forward, the rest of this municipality is going
Right,
to
so-
be attended to and not just one specific area.
Correct, and I completely agree with you, but part of what the conversations I start off with the ordinances that are pending, and not, I don't even use the word pending, they haven't even been introduced yet, that we're working on, would address drainage and flooding issues throughout the entire town. I think possibly we're seeing more construction on the eastern side of town, possibly on some of the smaller lots. And they would be ordinances that homeowners would be paying for, not the taxpayers of Jackson. And that's subject number one. Subject number two is looking at our maps and getting all the inventory and getting all the information out to the public. So then the governing body, together with hopefully input from the residents, could make an informed decision. Where are we investing into 2026? I think we should have a 5-year plan on looking at our infrastructure, looking at our roadways. And I think that's something that we would definitely want input on.
So yes, you have said that. So are you going to put all the roads that will be improved up on the website? So all residents will know, because the
Sure.
list that's there is from 2023. That
Miss-
is the last time it was updated.
Ms. Hannum, the answer is
2023.
mayor
Absolutely.
yes.
So 100%. So we're learning.
I'm
things
waiting
that
for the
everybody's-
ordinances to be posted again.
Which ordinances?
They used to be posted, all you have to do is click on the tab, and all the ordinances
So
would show
Christian,
up.
can we
And
meet
none of
about
them
the
are
Okay,
there.
ordinances?
let's talk infrastructure, but fine.
So
fine.
that's besides the point, but I'm letting you know because I did address it with you before, and it's still not done.
Are you talking about your street?
No, I'm talking about the ordinances being posted on
Okay,
the
let's stick,
Jackson
okay, fine.
website, so
We're-
people don't
okay.
have to search.
Infrastructure,
But
yes. the
as
streets
far
will be-
as the rest of the infrastructure, you talked about lighting.
Yes.
So when you are going to improve the lighting, I'm going to use Elm Street as a case in point.
So Ms. Hannah, I'm just
And
gonna,
I know
I'm just
that's-
gonna stop you for a
excuse me, I know that is a difficult spot, but I chose to stop to go through there before I came here. And we're going on 6 months. It is lit up like a stadium. And here's the problem. You know, most people who know me know that I am a huge environmentalist. So by doing what was done on that road, on that neighborhood street by Lake Eno, and the migratory birds and all the other animals that have, that are here, what is the plan? You're going to do 9,000 luminize again? Or is it going to be?
No, so
So
I apologize for jumping in, but I can tell you that we have emailed and called Bob Bryce from JCP&L. We have a recurring reminder on our calendar, and we call him every week to ask for an update. We requested at least 3 months ago, if not longer, to replace each one of those lights with a 30-watt light with a lower color temperature. And the response that we've gotten is, oh, yeah, no problem. It's an easy fix. It's just a matter of swapping the fixtures. And we've been asking for an update, and that's the same response we've been getting for the last 3 months. We've made the request, but ultimately it's up to JCP&L to be the one that replaces the light
But it was
fixtures.
very easy to do the request to put stadium lighting on that street.
yes.
So,
So again, I hear you,
For a
Miss Hannah,
resident.
Miss Hannah, we hear you, but like Carlos brought up, I think there was a lot that was thrown out, and we very clearly said before, we will have another roundtable, we can talk about lighting, but we're going to stick to the first part for now until.
You mentioned lighting.
I mentioned in the beginning, but then after Carlos brought up that we were speaking very fast, we're throwing a ton of subjects out. And like I said, there's a lot to be covered in infrastructure. We're going to stick to that, and we can talk about lighting separately, but I can piggyback off Charlie. He sends literally an email, him and his entire team, every single week saying this is a top priority, and it is a top priority.
All right, so I'm just going to end with this. Can we please contact the county? The light over here, coming from Cedar Swamp Road to make a left-hand turn onto Bennett's Mills. Can we have a left-hand turn signal? The same way there's a left-hand turn signal on the other side. Because you take your life into your hands to make a left. It makes absolutely no sense it wasn't done when they actually did it originally. Or you have to sit there for at least 3 lights to make a left. So now the backed up traffic, on top of the backed up traffic over by Jackson Mills, it's a mess.
So what I can say is we will definitely tomorrow send an email to Mark Janke and his staff asking them to look into this.
I think he's away until Thursday.
Thursday.
Wait today.
So we will send the email. He's got a staff, assistant engineers. What I will say is both of the roads are under the county's jurisdiction. So we can make the request and we can follow up with the request, but ultimately, I know residents don't want to hear this,
There's been a
but
lot of accidents lately.
no,
Mark.
I know.
Charles, I'll follow up tomorrow with the county.
And just add to it, to do something about the tractor trailers that are parking there too.
Okay.
But
Let's stick.
on the roadway or in
Oh,
the,
on Cedar Swamp, yeah.
okay.
It's turned into a
Anyone
truck
else on
stop.
this part of the, Holly?
With the MS4 permit, you said that is it the watershed and inventory report is only 90% done?
No,
Or,
so
or just the mapping you're talking
just the
about?
mapping. The township did not authorize the watershed improvement plan portion of that yet, but that is something that is going to need to be done to comply. One of the things that needs to happen for the watershed improvement plan to be accurate to recommend location improvements is we need to complete the mapping to have the baseline of where everything is and where everything is connected.
Right, not the improvement plan, because that's not due till the end of next year, but the inventory report that was due January of this year.
Correct. So the council authorized us to start the work, I want to say their second meeting in July. We started that work in the middle of August. Township, Jackson Township is a very big township. There's a lot of assets to collect. We've collected, I want to say 90 to 95% of the assets that we know about. There's 5% of inlets and outfalls that someone went out there to actually get the point of it, but we can't get the invert of the outfall. We can't get the invert of the pipe, either because the inlet might have leaves in it. It might be submerged in water. The outfall might be in a tributary of the Matitaconk that we can't physically see because of the water levels. So it's going to be completed in the spring. It's just we need additional help from DPW to get those additional assets collected.
Okay. My other question was, as far as like the infrastructure needs in the older developments, how many stormwater management basins do we have prior to like these newer developments, like in the older areas?
if any?
That's one of the components of the MS4 is we're also looking to try to update the inventory of township-owned stormwater management basins, county-owned stormwater management basins, and privately owned either by commercial developer or an HOA. So that's part of it is there are a number of basins that we've done research and ownership, private developer or HOA versus the township is unclear. So there's additional follow-up that needs to happen with all of those.
Okay, with some of the existing stormwater management basins, is there a consideration of maybe doing retrofitting on some of the existing structures that we have already in town and just making them more,
Holly, can you explain that for the lay-
retrofitting?
Yeah,
Oh.
what that is?
When you have an existing basin and it's not really functioning properly, there's ways to like either make the basin larger or put in a better outlet structure. Make sure those pipes that go to the outfalls are cleaned out properly, using or making it turning an infiltration to a bioretention basin. So using plants to kind of take up that water instead of if you have a poor infiltration rate in that particular, it's not working, it's failing. So
Yes, there are projects to retrofit existing stormwater management basins. I can tell you, I think the township already, this is before my time with Jackson Township, one of my colleagues did it, but there was, I think the basin at the corner of Cook Road and Hyson Road. That was a township-owned basin that Rutgers actually reached out to the township. They got a grant from the state to rehab that basin, and they basically turned the project over to the township, and we oversaw the construction. So there are projects out there, and there are grant monies out there, and that's something we could definitely investigate further, because, you know.
yeah, I work on one of the grants with RC&D, and we do stuff between Lakewood and Howell, which is one of the towns I inspect. So we have grant money that we were retrofitting basins that were failing. So
You work with CME on a couple of those basins?
yes.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yep.
So, and would also consideration for like green infrastructure to even some of like offering of the residents, or you have some of these houses of worships, which I think
We've had that
I asked you about,
Yeah.
that they're tax exempts, will
They
also
would
get
qualify
them,
for that, yeah.
they can apply for those green. So having like a rain garden, in some of these developments to help do that.
So after we're all done, I will come over and talk with you because I'm interested to get more information on the grant you're talking about.
Sure.
That's something definitely would be interested in.
So just to quickly, just to summarize what Holly's bringing up is our ordinance for our green committee really is outdated. It has members from Memorial High School, Liberty High School, Republicans. It doesn't really make any sense. So we appointed Holly for now. So she's our liaison for it. We are looking to redo our ordinance so we could actually get a functioning, and I think if I understand correctly, that if you have nonprofits or schools, they could qualify for some of those funding and give us that.
And I just want to touch on three things to hopefully fill in some gaps of the prior three commenters. The infrastructure mapping, once that's completed, every municipality in the state of New Jersey is required to provide an electronic format of that to provide it to the state. So it'll go on their GIS website. So any resident in the state of New Jersey can pull that up and it'll be publicly available information. So once it's completed and it's approved by DEP, anyone in the state of New Jersey will have access to be able to see where the stormwater infrastructure is.
Yes, we will.
Will it be on the stormwater page that we have for Jackson, or is it just the mapping through?
Yes. So two things. There is a map that's on the stormwater webpage. It's based off of collection that was from probably like the early 2004. So
Yeah.
data collection with GPS was not very good in early 2004. So that's why this is happening. So there will be a PDF of the township-wide stormwater mapping on the township's webpage. As far as hosting a virtual map, that is something that costs a lot of money for a municipality to do that. So that's why the state is requiring every municipality to send it to the state so they can host it for anyone in the state of New Jersey to view.
Anyone else? We didn't get a chance yet on this part.
Actually, I have a question. I'm not even sure if it even belongs in the context of this meeting. If I'm introducing anybody else, I'll put the straight up front. I'm here partly. My voice doesn't matter.
It's a recorded meeting, so in case someone was watching, I want them to be able to watch it. Hear you.
This one, sorry, buddy. Anyway, the reason I'm here is I read something online about the population of Jackson. Somehow there's something ongoing that we're going to have 3 times the population we currently have. We're expecting, or somebody is anticipating, that we would have a population of 200,000 residents as compared to our current state, which is 67, 68,000. Is this familiar to anyone here, or is this some joker deciding
So,
to make an old man worry unnecessarily?
so there was someone who came to a council meeting, a county elected official who said that number. And I think there was a follow-up meeting where one of our residents here asked if that's the intent of this governing body or anyone currently in government here in Jackson. And the answer was absolutely not. Someone's obviously repeating that constantly now in many of stories online, but there is no intent currently by any member of the governing body that I'm aware of to increase our density to 200,000.
That may be a little rough around the edges. It's a farce.
Correct.
Thank you so much. Greatly appreciate it.
Absolutely.
Can I just want to answer 2 more points. So Jim mentioned one of the issues with a lot of the drainage is the cleaning of the inlets by DPW. I do know that DPW, there's a handful of drainage issues that we know are a maintenance issue with the inlets during the leaf collection season. If they're not out there and they don't clean it, it's going to cause an issue. They do their best to get out there and clean it in advance of these storms, but some of them, you know, what shows up as maybe projected to be a half an inch an hour, you know, in Jackson Township, you know, all it takes is a storm to move 20 miles one way or the other, and then we're getting 4 inches of rain. So they do their best. I can tell you with one of the projects we're actually just submitted authorization to bid it at the next council meeting, is going to be addressing some of those issues in Brookwood 1. There's a number of inlets that get covered with debris, silt, and everything just keeps going down to the next inlet, to the next inlet, to the next inlet. So there will be improvements to add additional drainage infrastructure, to add capacity to the system, to hopefully head off those kind of issues. Because it is a burden for DPW. They can't be everywhere at once. They try to be everywhere at once, but sometimes Mother Nature acts on its own. To Ms. Hannum, regarding the green infrastructure. So the way that the ordinance is currently written, for not residential development, you could put in just a simple dry well. For non-residential development, so that's everything other than a single family home, you would have to first exhaust the ability to implement green infrastructure. So whether it's a rain garden, whether it's a cistern, whether it's infiltration basin, right? If there's something on the property that prevents it to be able to do that, then they could do a dry well. But there is requirements to try to push the green infrastructure to model kind of what the state has required in the last 4 years.
All right, so real quick, I'll just use a friend. In Brookwood 1. So a resident is putting an addition, a very, very large addition on their home, right to the 10-foot property line. And how is that? I mean, because they didn't have to go for a variance, so they're just getting a permit. So how is engineering stepping in and telling the resident what they need to do? Or it's just, I got my building permit, I'm putting up an addition, and that's it?
So if,
Currently, or if the ordinance goes through? Currently, like today?
Currently.
So currently, if there's additions below a certain threshold, it doesn't come to engineering for a grading plan review. With the ordinance, if it's implemented and someone was adding 1,000 square feet of new impervious coverage, it would require a review from engineering. And we would look at not just the sizing of the dry well, we would also look at the grading of the side property line to make sure, you know, you're not just dumping the water onto the neighbor's property. We currently, anything that does come to us for a plot plan engineering review, we do our best to make them provide dry wells and regrade the property to make sure that it's not creating a negative impact. It's just, it's left up to the discretion of the township engineer. The goal would be for it to be more prescriptive so that someone doing 1,000 square foot addition or greater to their home knows what the requirement is, and it's not a guessing game, and they don't have to revise the plan 3 or 4 times to get something that's going to be satisfactory from an engineering position.
But what I'm seeing with some of these additions, I believe it can only be 70% coverage on, I'll use flare. So only 70% coverage on the lot. I'm seeing additions that are far exceeding this 70% coverage.
Yeah.
And then when I question it, I'm being told, oh, no, it's 70%. And I know it's not.
That would be a zoning office right now,
Yes.
right?
So planning and zoning, they do the first review to review bulk setbacks, impervious coverage, building coverage, and everything like that. And then if it exceeds a threshold where it then comes to engineering, they forward it to us for review. But there are a certain amount of additions of a certain size that if it meets the setbacks and it doesn't exceed the impervious coverage, it currently doesn't come to engineering for review. The goal with this.
So then what recourse does, say, residents in the neighborhood watching this have with a property owner doing this, exceeding the impervious coverage, and the fact that the zoning department decided just to turn their head because they actually did?
I can't speak to the specifics of another department. I can only tell you when something comes to us, and I can send you examples of, 3 or 4 iterations of a review on a grading plan on a home because it's not satisfactory because they're sending water onto the neighbor. They're not putting a dry well commensurate with the size of what they're putting in. So when it does get to us, we do our best, but it has to get to us from planning and zoning.
Anyone else? Because we have 15 minutes left. Ms. Jones.
I just have a question about, I get that you're looking to do this ordinance, but by the time you write it, pass it, figure it out, and you implement it, we're really back to where we started, and it's still just a Band-Aid because there are so many projects going through in our town every single day. So it's great that we're going to do that, but if you don't have anything there to help what's going on now, then we're really just going to be back where we were. And my second point is, and with all due respect, you said an Ocean County person said what they said about what we're going to be. It wasn't just someone in Ocean County. It was Commissioner Frank Sadeghi, who stood at one of our council meetings and said we will be a mega center, an epicenter. So we can say that it's not going to happen, but it's not like I just looked around and said, this is what we're going to be. This is the Ocean County Commissioner who said it. So it was said, so it's not just hogwash. It does put fear into the residents of Jackson.
Sure.
So
So with regard to your first question is, and I completely hear you with, but the reality is our job is, I think as elected officials and engineers is to plan, do whatever we could to stop the issue that's currently going on and put whatever safeguards in to prevent. We unfortunately can't, and as the engineer said before, we can't require people who have already done it. So, that reality exists, but I think we are, and you mentioned like where it's holding. We've had multiple conversations, and like I said before, I had a conversation with Councilman Borelli this morning. I had another conversation with Councilman Palmieri over the weekend about this concept, and it's something that I don't think it's 6 months out if we get there. Got a draft today again about it, so that's where we're holding on it.
I do understand that, but I'm telling you as a resident on Hyson Road, and we've had an issue from a project that went on, and we've exhausted everywhere we possibly can. We're still reaping the consequence of it. So and for me, it's going to be small compared to what's coming. So I just feel like maybe you need to put a little more into the ordinance to ensure that we don't find ourselves right back here.
Charlie?
Yeah, so you're right, right? Ordinances need to be in place. You can't enforce an ordinance that's not in place. You can't just say, oh, we adopted this ordinance and that thing you did a year ago, now you have to comply with this ordinance, unless they're exceeding impervious coverage or, certain caveats. What I would say is if that ordinance does pass by council, it would be a significant step forward for Jackson Township. Of the 530 some odd municipalities in the state of New Jersey, I would probably say that 30 or less have this non-major development standard. So it would be a significant requirement if it's added to the code. So it's not a nothing throwaway that like a feel-good thing. It will have a measurable impact, and it's something that 90% of the municipalities in the state aren't requiring. So I think we recognize the master plan. There was a lot of public comment and sentiment about the drainage issues in town and flooding and things like that. This would be, one of the many steps forward that can be taken to try to
And-
hopefully stop it where it is now, not let it progress further
And-
than where it currently
And
is.
Charlie, just to echo, the reason why we're not rushing it, and we've been having these conversations for the past 3 weeks in a very extensive way, is we want to make sure we get it right. We don't want to do something that we turn around after 2 meetings and some residents here come up and say nothing changed and nothing's able to get better. So we speak quite often, myself and Charlie, and I am in the process of engaging with all the council members, making sure that we do this in the right way. And that's part of why we're here now, is solicit ideas. And most people here have my number, have a way of getting through, and we're here this is an issue. And like Charlie said, I think it would be a historic step in the right direction that should have happened a couple years ago.
So, and just to add to that, right? So I know there was discussion about certain portions of the township are getting, maybe things are happening a little bit quicker than other things. If the ordinance were to be adopted, it would apply to every single part of Jackson Township. So regardless of whether you own a 5-acre property out on the west part of town off of West Veterans, and you're putting in a 5,000 square foot pole barn, you would have to comply with that ordinance requirement, right? Realistically, there's a lot of green space on these properties where there's ability for runoff to infiltrate into the ground, to go into the soils and everything like that. But the effort is being made for it to be uniform throughout the municipality to every single property owner. So every property owner has to comply with that requirement. It's going to be most impactful on the eastern part of town where things are more dense from a residential development perspective, but it will be applied uniformly throughout the township if it's adopted.
Yeah,
Carlos?
I think I fit in your example about the 5-acre stuff. And if you're telling me that it's going to be I'm going to have less puddles in my property, my dogs go run around, if I put a dry well in there, even though it's an expense, I appreciate that. I understand some people might not look at it that way, but if you say, look, you can solve your problem, because I have that problem, right? I do.
So Carlos, the example
So I appreciate
the example that Charlie gave me
the
that
ordinance.
example that Charlie gave me that scared me was that if, and again, I live in Brookwood, if 100 homes in Brookwood out of the 450 homes would do 1,000 square foot addition, I think what's the calculation of acreage that we lose?
Yeah, it's going to be acres. I think we did the calculation from Robbins Estates, which is like 60 some odd acres. If each one of those were adding 1,000 square foot, you'd be like 6 acres of additional impervious coverage. That was probably not contemplated when that development was built in the 60s. So.
Right, yeah. My concern was, a single residential home. Yes, I want to put up a barn. I have, now you're going to make me extra expense, right? But if you're telling me you need it, because otherwise you're going to have puddles on your property next to that barn or anywhere.
Water needs to go
I
somewhere, right?
appreciate it. Yeah,
So, and
that's all I'm saying. I actually appreciate it. I don't like the extra expense, but
no, and
can help me.
to add on to that, right? Any municipal ordinance, especially from a land use perspective, applicants have the ability to either come to the land use board or to petition the governing body to seek waiver or an exception from a specific requirement. There are properties where there may be a hardship where the water table is 12 inches below the ground and you physically can't put a dry well. It would not serve any purpose, right? So there will be language to allow property owners to plead their case of why they are deserving because of hardships to an exception. So
Before Jim, anyone else who didn't get a chance yet, we have 5 more minutes, and then I'm not sure how fast Charlie needs to run out, but then anyone else? And
Stay as long as
if not, I'll turn the floor to Jim. Mr. Jones.
Good evening, all. potable water that we drink, you know, water that's coming to our sinks? I mean, we have to be concerned about that. And is there more growth coming on within Jackson itself? I mean, you know, you mentioned the 600,000 people coming in, but of course, you know,
Uh-oh.
something that's not coming about, but how much growth are we expecting here in the Jackson area? And do we have to be concerned? I mean, you were having the engineering report, so, you know, and how much more infrastructure are we going to have to pay for
So,
as a taxpayer?
so with regard to water, I think the MUA recently started the process, or I don't know if where they're holding with their water master plan studies. I know there was something that I thought they authorized last year, if I remember correctly.
Those main extensions, for those impact fees. There's even an ordinance for impact fees. The change that is being driven needs to be covered by somebody, and it shouldn't be the existing residents.
Correct. Correct. Mr.
You also mentioning that the water levels were going down, that water tables were going down. That could be a concern, I guess, for people who have wells.
So that's a good question. So when the state updated the stormwater rules 4 years ago, they implemented what's called green infrastructure. So stormwater management has to have recharge. You have to have a means to let the water go back into the soil, into the aquifer to replenish it. It used to be, 10 years ago, you could take 100 acres of a farm and send it all to one stormwater management basin at the end of the property. Well, that's good for managing stormwater. That doesn't do a lot of good to the aquifer and to replenishing the groundwater, because now I'm surcharging it at one spot on a 100-acre property. With the new stormwater rules, you now have to split that up throughout the site. So that way, the thought is to try to mimic the existing conditions as far as replenishing the aquifer and the groundwater. So going back to your question on the dry wells, right? So anytime that someone comes and has to get an engineering approval, if it's on a lot that's serviced by septic system, we request that they put the existing footprint of the septic disposal field and the tank. And while it doesn't fall under our purview, we would still review it, like required separation distances from a dry well to a septic system, because there can be adverse impacts if they are located closely. So that is something that we look at when we see those being proposed on a point.
Mr. Jones, do you have anything you want to say quickly?
I really don't know where to begin on this. Having experience with road work for 30 years, maintaining, building, what have you, a lot of times with ordinances are only as good as the enforcement, and we've always spoken about that. And same thing with drainage. Drainage is only as good as the maintenance done on them, okay? Now, people are creatures of habit. If you're a creature of habit and you constantly blow your driveway off and blow the crap into the road, where do you think it's going? Capacity can only be capacity if you allow it to have capacity. If you start filling your drains up with leaves, garbage, silt, roadway dirt. I've seen it, my neighbor down the road, he has a constant love affair with blowing the shit in the road, excuse me.